Thank you. So good evening again, and welcome to this December 12th, 2022 meeting of the Lake Bluff Village Board of Trustees. Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Yankoman?
Here.
Trustee Fisher?
Here.
Trustee Hatch?
Here.
Trustee Marquis?
Here.
Trustee Rappin?
Here.
And Trustee Ryder?
Here.
Thank you. Please stand and join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flags
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next is a proclamation declaring December 2022 as National Drunk and Drugged Driving Prevention Month. Whereas every year, thousands of lives are needlessly lost on our nation's roadway because of alcohol and drug impairment driving. And whereas alcohol, illicit drugs, and even over-the-counter and prescription medications can impair a driver's judgment, decrease motor coordination, and slow the reaction time necessary to safely operate a motor vehicle. And whereas December 5, 2022, the Illinois Department of Transportation fatal crash data reported that there are 1,045 fatal crashes, of which hundreds of these deaths involved a driver impaired by alcohol and/or drugs. And whereas the December holiday season is one of the deadliest times of the year for impaired driving and for thousands of families across the state and the nation, holidays are a time to remember loved ones lost. And whereas organizations across the state and the nation are engaged in the drive sober or get pulled over enforcement effort and other campaigns that foster public awareness of the dangers of impaired driving and anti-impaired driving law enforcement efforts. And whereas the Village of Lake Bluff is proud to partner with the Illinois Department of Transportation's Division of Traffic Safety and other traffic safety groups in that effort to make our roads and streets safer. So now, therefore, I, Régis Charlot, Village President of the Village of Lake Bluff, Illinois, do hereby proclaim the month of December 2022 as Drunk and Drugged Driving Prevention Month in the Village of Lake Bluff, and call upon all citizens, government agencies, business leaders, hospital and healthcare providers, schools and public and private institutions to promote awareness of the impaired driving problem, to support programs and policies to reduce the incidence of impaired driving, and to promote safer and healthier behaviors regarding the use of alcohol and other drugs this holiday season and through the year on this day. Thank you very much. Next is item number 4, that would be the consideration of the minutes of the November 28th, 2022 Village Board meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Thank you. A second.
Second.
Are there any changes? Thank you. Clerk, please call the roll.
Voice vote.
It's a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you. Next is our non-agenda items and visitors. The Village President and Board of Trustees allocate 15 minutes during this item for those individuals who would like the opportunity to address the Village Board of Trustees on any matter not on the agenda. Each person addressing the Village Board of Trustees is asked to limit their comments to a maximum of 5 minutes. Do we have anybody who wish to address the board today? in this room. Do we have anybody online?
There is one person raising their hand, yes.
Awesome.
Hi, it's Susie McMurray, and I did not see me on the agenda. I am replacing a fence in my front yard,
Number 16.
and
Yeah.
Mike Croak had me write a letter to you all, which you should have received this week.
Susie, this is Drew. How are you?
Hi.
You're item number 16 on the consent agenda, and I think you're going to be taken out of order, so earlier than you would normally have been heard.
Okay, well, I can sit here and wait for that then. I just didn't see it.
Yep.
So I was curious. Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Susie, we will take item 10, 19, and 16 to make, to take care of those items faster for you, okay? Are there any other comments online?
Doesn't appear so.
Thank you. Moving on to the next item, that would be the village board sets the order of a meeting. The village president and board of trustees will entertain requests from anyone present on the order of business to be conducted during this village board meeting. And of course, we have requests for item 10, 10A and 10B, 19 and 16. Without objections on the board. Moving on to item number 10. That would be the appointments to various advisory boards and commissions. And that would be first for Michael Buscio to the Sustainability and Community Enhancement Ad hoc Committee. Subject to the consent, actually I should ask for a
Motion.
could I please have a motion for this,
So
to
moved.
approve the appointment of Michael Buscio?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you very much. Subject to the consent of the Board of Trustees, the village president appoints members to the village various advisory boards and commissions. Village President Charlot recommends the appointment of Mike Buscio to fill the final vacancy on the Sustainability and Community Enhancement Ad hoc Committee. Is there any discussion about this appointment?
I'm just happy to see Mr. Busio here, and I'm glad he's joined us, and we're excited to have him volunteer. Thank you.
So voice vote.
It's a voice vote. So that would be a voice vote. Everyone in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And I'm pleased to appoint you on this board. Thank you, Mike, for volunteering for our community. Thank you very much. And I'm happy you get to meet our board here. Next would be item 10B would be the appointment to various advisory boards and commissions, and that would be this time for Jeff Maguire to the Historic Preservation Commission. Could I please have a motion for this item?
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Subject to the consent of the Board of Trustees, the village president appoints members to the village various advisory boards and commissions. Village President Charlot recommends the appointment of Jeff Maguire to fill a vacancy on the Historic Preservation Commission. If approved, Mr. Maguire's term will expire on April 30, 2023. And I also had a conversation with Jeff a couple days ago, and he would only be available to start this appointment January 1st.
Okay.
I don't know if I asked for a motion.
You did.
I did.
do.
It's a voice vote.
I have a question. I'm sorry. So why is the term only 4 months?
No, it's expiring on 2023.
Which is
Yeah.
4 months from January 1st?
I think
Is he filling a
I think he's
position?
filling a vacant seat that expires then, so you'll see him again, presumably, very soon.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for this fine point. Any more questions on this appointment?
You're saying he's only, just to be clear, for clarity's sake, he's not available to serve until January 1.
Correct.
I see, okay.
It is a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you. So this appointment stands. Next would be item number 19. Should we do 16 first?
Well, I think you'll do the entire consent
It's
agenda.
on the consent.
Yeah.
So let's do the consent agenda. Next would be our consent agenda with number 11, the acceptance of a correspondence. Please note all correspondence was delivered to the Village Board of Trustees in the informational reports on November 23rd and December 2nd, 2022. Item number 12 would be the second reading of an ordinance declaring personal property owned by the Village of Lake Bluff as surplus. Item number 13, that would be a second reading of an ordinance comprehensively amending Chapter 1, 2, and 4 of a Title 10 of a municipal code and updating references to such chapters through Title 10. Item number 14, a second reading of an ordinance amending Title 1 of a Lake Bluff Municipal Code to provide financial incentives for historic preservations and codify the village's senior property tax grant program. I understand that item 15 was removed from the consent agenda.
Correct.
And last would be item 16, a resolution approving a license agreement to use a portion of village property at 454 Simpson Street. Is there a request to remove any of these items from the consent agenda? Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved?
Thank you. A second.
Second.
Is there any discussion on these items? So hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Yankoman,
Aye.
Trustee Fisher,
Aye.
Trustee Hatch,
Aye.
Trustee Markey,
Aye.
Trustee Rappin,
Aye.
and Trustee Ryder.
Aye.
Thank you very much. And that would satisfy Susie's.
Mrs.
business,
McMurray,
right?
yep.
Mrs. McMurray.
Should we let her know, just?
I think she's
She's
on the
watching.
call, isn't she?
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Susie. Next would be item number 19. That would be the second reading of an ordinance amending the Lake Bluff zoning regulation relating to the hours of operation for on-premise food and beverage service. Is there a motion to approve the ordinance?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you very much. During the public hearing for the Lake Bluff Brewing Company's special use amendment at the PCZBA's May regular meeting, the PCZBA expressed support for establishing uniform limitations on the hours of operation for restaurants rather than continue to regulate each individually. When the village board considered first reading of these amendments, it concurred that the PCZBA should review this topic. So accordingly, the PCZBA has reviewed this issue and recommends the village adopt a uniform set of hours of operation for food and beverage uses in the central business district in order, 1, to improve the consistency, ease of administration, and enforcement of a village zoning rule, and 2, bolster the economic vitality of a village in a manner that is conscientious of neighboring uses and residents. As described in the attached staff memorandum, the attached draft ordinance would create a new section 10-6A-13 and amend existing special use permits and outdoor dining approvals, for example, on the public sidewalk, to establish the following restricted hours of operation. The agenda has a table with all the hours that are basically from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. or midnight, okay, and I will leave that to you. At its November 16, 2022 meeting, the PCZBA conducted a public hearing and unanimously, 6-0, recommended that the village board adopt the attached ordinance. Based on testimony received during the hearing, the draft hour of operation were revised to be 1 hour longer for Block 1 of the CBD due to its additional separation from residencies. As a result of this change, the draft ordinance is equally or more permissive than the village's current permitted hours in all cases except for Innovacy's sidewalk dining. Innovacy and the other door are currently authorized to operate on the sidewalk until 11 p.m., but closes entirely at an earlier hour. Finally, please know the following. Number 1, Innovacy received notice of a hearing but did not participate. A subsequent telephone conversation with the proprietor, John Desrosiers, prior to this first reading confirmed that Innovacy is comfortable with the proposed hours of operation. Number 2, when Prairie proprietor John Davis was contacted after the 11/28 first reading, he stated that his business should have the same operating limitations for outdoor service area as all other CBD Block 1 businesses. And number 3, instead of adopting the PCZBA recommendation, the village board might select one permissible set of outdoor service area operational regulations or send it back to the PCZBA for further study. Are there comments on the board?
You do have, Mr. Jeff Urso is here in attendance tonight too. There's questions for him if.
I have a comment. So one comment that I received from my village resident this week was to clarify that this is not requiring the businesses to be open or available to be open at these times, but rather these are the maximum hours of the day that they might be able to operate. I was puzzled that that was the interpretation given, that we were somehow mandating them to be open at these times, but perhaps there's a permitted hours of operation that we could see. CBD food and beverage permitted hours of operation might possibly serve to clarify. I'm not sure. It's not mandatory. But the other thing that I wanted to point out is we, as for ease of reference, point out Block 1 as being the deciding, differentiating factor. But the reason that's the differentiating factor is not because it is Block 1 per se, but there is no, on that half of the Block 1, on the CBD half of Block 1, there is no residence above those restaurants, right?
That's correct.
If we were to change those to residential use, we might have to revisit this, I would think, because then the reason for distinguishing between Block 1 and Block whatever.
2.
Is it 2? On the other side of Block 2?
Block 2 is this block between Walnut and Oak.
On both sides of the street? Anyway, okay. The reason for distinguishing, as we have here, would not be there. So it's really the non-residential nature of Block 1 that makes sense to make those differences.
So it's actually a fine distinction because isn't there under consideration the possibility to put residential units in Block 1, basically above a brewery?
It's possible when that development was originally approved, there was relief granted, a pathway for it to convert to residential someday.
So I think we need to make the statute clear that it really is applicable to non-residential locations rather than Block 1, because if that residential use comes in, it would no longer make sense to differentiate, would it?
That's a policy decision.
Yeah,
Right.
okay.
And I think that Block 1, you have to say the north side of Block 1 too, which goes to North Avenue. And there are
Yes, right.
There is residential structures there, and I would say wrapped around the corner on Sheridan Road, there are residential units in that 3-story building.
Yes, I
there,
understand.
but not facing
Not
Village Green,
facing
Village
the
Green.
way the outdoor uses are on the south side of the
Yeah.
building, right? So the residential uses are removed, as you've said, removed from the noise that would be,
The bookend of a building, yes.
right.
Yeah.
On the other hand, in the next block down, residential uses are above
Both sides of the street.
on both sides of the street on our above, and behind is where in part some of the outdoor use is behind the building or on the side of the building through the alley, which abuts a residential use in the condominiums.
Right there, yes.
Pointing the wrong direction, yes. So the point being that the CBD is all one place. We treat it the same for many, many reasons, for most reasons. This reason is not because it just happens to be Block 1, and we're deciding to treat Block 1 more leniently. It's the location of the residential uses that distinguish it. And that is the reason that I'm comfortable, anyway, making a distinction as we proposed here.
I got you, thank you.
So do we need to make a motion to change the language to reflect that?
That's how it's currently written, actually.
Oh, it is.
I'll let you go.
Yeah, I guess I just feel like it's just interesting that we talk about these are establishing uniform limitations, but they're not, because Block 1 is different for their outside dining, so I have a little bit of a logistical issue with it. If I'm outside dining on Block 2 and all of a sudden it's now 11 o'clock on a Friday, do I have to go in the building now to get a drink? To me, it just seems to create more logistical issues, and I would just love to see all of this uniform. I understand there's residential businesses there or residences there, but I also feel like what is the issue with the noise there? Is it music? Well, then maybe we just make sure that the music stops earlier. Or I haven't heard any residents come in and complain as we've been talking about this, so I'm not sure why we need to make that distinction. And I also know that these businesses work on razor-thin margins, so the more that we can give them the opportunity to serve their patrons, I just find it interesting that we're talking about uniform limitations, and they're not.
And
They're not uniform.
I'll throw out a thought as well, that maybe in that amendment, it could be any owned residences. And this is just a thought, but there's a landlord that owns the top of the building and the bottom of the building, and they have renters. And those renters may not want to stay if there's music or people there until midnight, and that's on the owner. The owner could always tell the establishment that they can only be open until a certain amount of time in their lease. So it's really on the owner to decide, they're rented units, it's not owned. So for me, I would be more comfortable having the onus be on the owner.
Drew, am I remembering sort of recent history properly when we had Kathy O'Hara talk about the noise aspect? And if it is up to the building owner, but it's affecting people who are not just right above, I mean, it's not as directional as one might think. And I don't remember all the conversations about who lived where, but it was an issue, and it wasn't just one person complaining. There were a number of people who said, but I live here. And, there's a quality of life issue, and
So
I'm not out till midnight and I don't live there, but I just want to speak for those people who obviously were very much affected and were vocal at that time.
So what I hear on the board are three different things. We're talking about consistency overall for simplicity. That's number one. Number two, we're talking about three different aspects that are all operations in outdoor service area, that is number two, and noise on these operations. And so I very much remember the conversation about the alley and music being played in the alley, and residents that are just above the alley, and the type of reverberation and amplification of a unique topology of the alley for the residents that are living there, especially Mrs. O'Hara. So is that the thing we should modify on this ordinance?
I just want to clarify that the village has other mechanisms to manage that. This is outside, this is really, think of it along street frontage, not the alley, because the alley is special in that regard, in that
Yes.
there's a special use permit that governs that.
Okay. Okay.
And they have specific limitations, and that was really the biggest source of the concern. It was coming from the apartment dwellers above, as well as some of the condo owners that hear that,
It goes a lot in that
yeah,
alley.
it bounces around in those hard, very narrow space.
So we're looking at two different things now. If we remove that concern, that is consistency, number one, and number two, times for all operations and operations in outdoor service area.
Well, I think the consistency issue is taken away if it's qualified by a residence above a business. That's being consistent. And instead of calling it CBD Block 1, it would just say CBD with residences above, CBD with not residences above, something like that. And it may fall along the line of Block 1 and other CBD blocks at this point in time, but in the future, should there be residences above, then we're already covered. And it's, the distinction isn't preferential treatment to CBD Block 1 and those specific vocal business owners, but the presence or lack of same.
Well, there might be a fine point to that is, you might want to put a distance. I mean, if I live next door to business and I live on top of a building next door to business that has music, that business would be allowed to have people outdoor, even though I am on the building next door.
Right,
So you might want to put a certain vicinity
right,
to that.
called the block.
And then we're back to.
Yeah, but it makes sense,
But, yeah.
because it's not the distinction of I'm getting
Block one
preferential.
always gets.
Right.
Yes.
And should one residence happen, if something like that occurred, then the entire block is now a different category. I mean, depending on how you word it, it's important to think about how it's worded.
One other option would be there's no music after 11 o'clock anywhere.
Could you say that one more time?
There would be no music allowed anywhere, like trying to be consistent, right?
Right,
Everything
right.
closes at 12, there's no music anywhere after 11, then we're kind of being fair across the board.
Do block parties run after 11?
No?
No.
Well, Drew would know.
No, they don't. 11's been the hardest stop, and generally speaking, 10 o'clock is when they should be stopping. I mean, that's what we've experienced. Most things just start dying down naturally anyway. And that's generally true for outdoor dining. There may be one or two tables and, going later sometimes, but it's complaint is, somebody makes a complaint about enforcement, but I can't think of when that's ever happened, with somebody complaining about patrons being too loud. I can't remember that ever happening, which is good news.
So maybe it's not so much, like, when we talk about creating uniform limitations here, maybe it's not so much about, it sounds like we have other ways of dealing with noise or problems with music, or we have, maybe we can actually make this uniform if we're just talking about patrons dining on the sidewalk, because it doesn't sound like we're getting a lot of complaints about any of that.
I think that's where we're driving from a consensus standpoint. Are we all?
I'm there.
You mean
You mean
everything would be
consistent at 12
midnight?
o'clock?
You mean everything would be midnight?
The more permissive time.
Yeah.
So weekdays till 11, weekends, midnight, and holidays, midnight.
As to the sidewalk in front of the buildings, is that what we're saying?
Yes.
Yes.
Not necessarily as to the alley, which is.
Not
okay.
definitely,
The alley's
not
its
excluding
own-
the alley.
Its own.
But if we've gotten complaints before about music after 11 or
But the
late,
music is a different.
but how's that handled, was what I was gonna ask.
It's depending on the level of the issue, but it's like most complaints, it's, 3 strikes and you're done, and where it's, hey, you need to turn it down. Usually there's compliance and that's where it ends.
So we don't have anything that says no music outside in the downtown district after 11 o'clock?
No. And most of the time, the village is issuing a special use permit.
Right.
For a special event permit to authorize it to a time certain, and that's, past practices told us this will be fine.
So if there is consensus on the board,
You do have one virtual participant looking to provide comment and
we have also.
somebody present.
Yes.
So I don't know if you
Let's,
want-
if there are no more comments for the time being on the board, I would like to invite Jeff. Thank you. Jeff, please state your name and your address, please.
Sure. Jeff Urso, 920 Burris Avenue, Lake Bluff. I just wanted to echo the Plan Commission's thoughts on the process. I support all businesses being open to 12 and 11 respectively. I'm not, we're not looking for a competitive, I represent Lake Bluff Brewery, I should say that. I'm not looking for a competitive advantage. However, the concern was noise with residents when they talked about it in depth. You know, to Drew's point, I don't believe that it's very loud. I'm a restaurateur. I have multiple pubs in both Knollwood and Lake Forest, and we are closer to residential homes than we are over here, and we don't really have it as an issue. Most people are pretty respectable. You get those 1-2 nights a year that, you know, on a block party or something like that, but usually people, you know, die down and they just want to enjoy the beautiful night. Lake Bluff is, you know, I don't know about you guys, but I love Lake Bluff in the summer, so downtown Lake Bluff is great. What we don't want to do is give Lake Forest and Knollwood a competitive advantage, and I would, right? So what I think what we want to do is be uniform with our neighboring villages and cities and kind of encourage our residents to stay and enjoy bars and restaurants in the downtown village. And then kind of going off with how the meeting was led as December being drunk driving, you know, recognition. We definitely don't want to push residents to a different town to drive back home. So I think we're one of the most walkable villages, and I think that is a great thing. And we're really talking about 3 months a year here, right? So 9 months a year, everyone's inside because it's kind of chilly or whatever. So we're talking about 3 months a year. And most people, in my experience, that move in a downtown district move because they want to. They want to be near the life. They want to be near bars and restaurants, and they want to walk uptown, and they want to have that experience. So if they wanted to live on the outskirts, they would. If they wanted, you know, the quiet enjoyment of their property. But I think there's something to be said about people that want to live in a downtown district as well. So I just encourage the board this evening to adopt the 11 and 12. You know, as far as noise regulations, that would be obviously however you guys feel about that. But I think until the restaurants and bars really abuse that privilege, that, you know, hopefully we're trusted to, you know, maintain a good experience for the residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. And actually, you're making a fine point, that is, how do we compare to other communities such as, especially Lake Forest?
I have a 1 a.m. in Lake Forest.
For outside service?
I have garage doors. So, and same with Pucks, in Knollwood, same thing, 1 a.m. So, and we've been operating Pucks for 3 summers now, no complaints. Again, you know, it's advantageous to the operator to keep our neighbors happy. You know, we want our neighbors to enjoy us and not complain about us, because otherwise we'll be here and you're telling us we're closing at 8 o'clock. So we want to make sure that, you know, we're respectful, we do, you know, things classy, and for, you know, keep everyone, you know, just to enjoy their time. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Do we have a comment online as well? Thank you.
Hi, this is Susie McMurray again. I agree with Jeff. I think it's unfair to take away a competitive edge from the people in Block 2 to Block 1. If we're going to make ordinances like this, they should be uniform for the whole town. And I agree with him too, that the people in Lake Bluff look out for each other. There have not been a lot of complaints about this. They've taken away the noise aspect from the alley already. And he's brought his music inside and whatever. But I'm just saying, I just feel that they shouldn't take away one person's opportunity to make money for an hour and close them earlier while the other people can be open. They should all be the same. And I'm a merchant downtown. I'm not open that late. But I go to these places and I support the local, other local merchants. So that's just my 2 cents, but thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. McMurray. Barb?
I just wanted to have a sense from Drew, and I don't know if our police chief is here. In terms,
Mike is here.
there he is. Just in terms of what kind of a burden does that place on you, who ends up being the one that gets the call or the request or complaint or whatever it is? Do you feel like it's manageable? And if we went to uniformly 11 on a weekday and midnight on weekends and holidays, I mean, you're the ones who really know.
Let's
So
ask
I
our
think,
chief of police. on
Well,
that.
if I'll take the first part of it, Matt, and if there's something to add, but generally speaking, the biggest complaints we get about the central business district is tables creeping out from where they're supposed to be, right? And that, I can't get my stroller through, or, that's the number one complaint we get, which is not a terrible thing, right? Fine. But like I said earlier, generally speaking, most of the outdoor activity has a certain,
Cadence.
rhythm to it, and it kind of generally starts waning as the night, 10 o'clock, it's
Yeah.
quieter and quieter. And there's sometimes there's a couple tables if it's a really nice evening, but generally speaking, it just goes by itself, and this goes to sleep by itself.
okay,
Yeah, I mean, with respect to some of the special use permits that you asked questions about, or some of those things, every now and again, we might get that call, and we try to handle that as it comes in. And to what Drew said, I can't recall a specific, hey, there was a loud group of people outside. Offhand, I can't say that I recall it, so.
okay. I just wanted to be cognizant, because we do have more businesses expanding
beverage,
and
yep.
opening and encouraging, and which is great, but there's also that awareness that we don't want to take it too far and then lose all that we've worked so hard to get, which is to have family-friendly and enjoyable, and it doesn't rely on people to have to complain to be able to do whatever it is you want to do.
Yeah, it's the occasional block party, like once every 3 years, somebody will
Take it too
find 11 on their amp, and we'll hear about it.
Yeah.
But that's about it.
And then we call Drew and we tell him to keep it down.
I can't hear you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you very much, Matt. So what we're talking about here is fairness, consistency of times. We're talking about drunk driving. That was a fine point. If people are looking for a drinking hole somewhere else in another community, for example, and the vitality of our downtown. People are in Lake Bluff because of who we are and what we do here.
I just want to make a motion when you're done.
I would actually ask for a motion to revise what was our original motion to include that was fine points.
And by that, you mean to see it again, to come back to the first meeting in January to see it again, is what you're suggesting? Because I just, generally speaking, there's not a rush for outdoor dining at this very moment. There are a few tables out that I've talked to some of the merchants that say they want to try them because people still want to be outside if the weather's halfway, 40 degrees, so.
Got it.
But generally speaking, it's not an issue for a while. I don't think there's any rush necessarily.
And the changes are significant, substantive enough that you should all see it again before we adopt.
Okay. So I would welcome a motion to see it again in January, for example.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you all for that conversation. Next item would be our village finance report. And that would be item 7A.
Oh, I don't, I'm sorry. Do you have a charge of this?
And that would be the warrant reports for November 20th to December 12, 2022, and November 2022 payroll expenditures. Is there a motion to approve the warrant report?
Second.
Thank you. As a summary of background and reason for request, we have an expenditure of village funds for payment of invoices in the amount of $341,908.03 for November 28th to December 12th, 2022, and an expenditure of village funds for payment of payroll in the amount of $288,681.08 for November 2022, for total expenditures of $630,589.11. You will find reports and document attached. That would be again the warrant report for November 28th to December 12th for $630,589.11. Specifying the invoice register report shows checks with status of open or paid. All checks with the status of open are computer-generated checks for the board's final approval. Checks with the status of paid are checks processed manually. Are there comments on the board for items in this report. Taryn?
I had a question about the frequency that we need to replace or purchase new heavy equipment. Burris equipment, I'm just noticing that was a hefty price tag. I'm curious how long a backhoe lasts.
That's a great question. If you'll attend maybe a budget meeting where we talk about that. We have been postponing investment in fleet for quite some time and pushing, and it's one of those where Jake, I'm sure he wants to jump out, he's jumping up and down, I'm sure to tell that we've pushed this off too long. We're also waiting for another heavy piece of equipment, which is our bucket truck, to get that replaced. And we also talked about there's up and coming a fire engine that we talked about that's coming up, not immediate out year, but looking outward, and there's a 48-month delivery time for that.
Yeah.
But Jake, I'm trying to remember, I think we have targeted 15-year replacement on backhoe, and we waited 20 for this?
20, yeah, correct,
Yeah.
20.
So we
We're at
postponed it for
20.
5 years.
Now, I'd like to point out that from a marketing standpoint, on the Police and Fire Safety Day, that backhoe is awesome with the police. Okay.
But yeah, so we try to be reasonable. We try to, we know when we sit down and talk about these internally, we're meeting with the department head, and we're talking to our mechanic about how much time they're putting into these pieces of equipment, and sometimes things leapfrog up because, you know, we got a dud. I mean, some of those, I hate to say it, those Chevy Tahoes that we bought, we thought, you know, were gonna be great. We got rid of, they were duds. And that's true of a lot of departments. Just didn't work well as a vehicle that you leave running 24/7. And that's the big difference. But anyway, so yeah, so we scrutinize those purchases internally, and more often than not, we feel comfortable recommending when they get purchased. So
And they were in the vehicle equipment replacement budget.
that's right. Yep, we have a separate equipment replacement fund. It was identified for replacement, and so its time has come due. And Jake, I don't know, do you know when we're supposed to get that bucket?
That is very much like the fire trucks right now. They're way out, and they can't guarantee price and or trade-in values right now. And we're having trouble getting the guy just to call us back.
How's the bucket doing right now?
The bucket
Like,
is
we have-
operational.
So
It's
we have
functional.
time, we have time.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any more questions on this report? Barb?
I had a question that I talked with Drew about earlier about the Demuth charge for replacing some leaking lead water service. And
Jeff to come up and answer this. We-
So the recent change in state law says you can't repair a lead water service. And it says that if you have to do an emergency repair, then the water provider has to replace it, which is very odd since we don't own it. But the law says that we have to replace it if it's repaired. So we worked with the property owner, there's a renter in there, about a plumber that they were comfortable with and the village was comfortable with doing the work. Because I don't like hiring somebody to go in your basement and cut a hole in the wall and fix things. That's always, like, it's all, you know, new area for us, and try to avoid touching anybody's house, you know, as much as possible, but in this case, we had to. So we used a vendor that we were both comfortable with and worked with in the past, and they did a job. We just, you know, normally we would get 3 quotes and do a low bidder, but in this case, because we're working on private property, we just didn't feel comfortable doing that, so we hired Demuth to do it. It seems to have turned out, and hopefully that will be the last one we have to do for a long time, but it was just unique that that was the one that leaked, was a lead service.
thank you so much.
Thank you. More items for scrutiny on the report. Thank you. This is a roll call. Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Fisher?
Aye.
Trustee Hatch?
Aye.
Trustee Markey?
Aye.
Trustee Rappin?
Aye.
Trustee Ryder?
Aye.
And Trustee Ankerman?
Aye.
Thank you all. Next is our Village and Services report. Mr. Irvin?
Jeff, would you come back up really quick? Sorry. So, really quickly, Under my report is a request for an extension on variations granted for 925 Sheridan Road. I shared that with you by code because that's what I need to do, to let you know I've granted an extension. If there's heartburn, you can let me know and we can try to put the toothpaste back in the tube. But it seems pretty reasonable request, and so just want to make sure you guys knew about that. The reason I had Jeff come back up is to talk about, I got a question earlier today from Trustee Markey inquiring about the status of the flashing beacon at West Washington. And I wanted Jeff to come up and give the latest and greatest on that project.
Yeah, you'll see 2 stakes out there where the beacons are gonna go. That is scheduled to happen either late this week or next. If anything, the last 18 months have taught me is nothing's guaranteed till it's in the ground. We're communicating with the contractor today. This one does return our calls. There are some that don't, like Jake was having that problem, but they're supposed to have the Julie locates done this week, and then when they're cleared, come back and install the poles. Sidewalk work, I think we're gonna put off until the spring when kids aren't in school, so we're not messing up their walk to school.
That's really exciting news.
Yes.
More frustrating, but
Just knowing that you know, there's poles in the ground, right? Our community, so.
yes.
Yeah, I feel
Our
like
neighborhood, yeah.
It's one of 2
And-
or 3 spots in towns that are super dangerous for citizens, so it's awesome.
And I think Drew can attest, I've been asking so much about it, so
Yeah.
I know it's been a difficult.
It seems like a
path,
simple
so-
project, just
Right.
is hit hurdle after hurdle, but hopefully we are in sight of the end here.
Great, very much appreciated, thank you.
And
Thank you,
that's,
Jeff.
that's all I have unless there's any questions.
Thank you. Moving forward. Next would be our village attorney's report.
No report tonight.
Thank you. And we will skip and we will resume to our other business, item 17. And that would be an ordinance levying property taxes for the fiscal year beginning May 1st, 2022 and ending April 30, 2023 for the village of Lake Bluff, Lake County, Illinois. Is there a motion to approve this ordinance?
So moved.
A second.
Second.
Thank you. Pursuant to state law, on or before the last Tuesday in December, the village must file with the county clerk an ordinance requesting a property tax to be levied on all taxable property within the village. After review of levy, estimates, and financial projections at their November 14th meeting, the Finance Committee unanimously recommended approval of an aggregate property tax levy of $4,784,541. The village share of a property tax levy is $3,700,177. It is anticipated that the Lake Bluff Public Library Board will request a property tax levy of $1,084,364 for the year 2022. The total levy amount of $4,784,541 is in compliance with the Property Tax Limitation Act, and the Truth in Taxation Act was not required for this levy. And we have Mrs. O'Connell to answer questions. Are there any questions on the board?
Did we hear from any residents, taxpayers about the first reading?
I have not.
I haven't heard anything.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? This is going to be a roll call. Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Hatch,
Aye.
Trustee Markey,
Aye.
Trustee Rappin,
Aye.
Trustee Ryder,
Aye.
Trustee Ankerman,
Aye.
and Trustee Fisher.
Aye.
Thank you very much. The next item also is related, and that will be item 18 for a second reading of an ordinance abating 2022 property taxes levied for general obligation debt series 2029 and 2029A bonds for the village of Lake Bluff, Lake County, Illinois. Is there a motion to approve this ordinance?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. The village currently has refunding bonds, Series 2019 and 2019A, general obligation bonds outstanding pursuant to Ordinance 2019-18 and 2019-26. The county clerk is required to extend a property tax levy in an amount sufficient to pay the interest and principal on the bonds. Fortunately, the Waterworks Fund has adequate funds to transfer to the Waterworks Bond and Interest account for principal and interest payments on the 2019 general obligation bonds and the 2019A refunding bonds, which allows the village to abate the annual property tax levy. Because the bond ordinances directing extension of the annual property tax levy were filed with the county clerk, an ordinance is required to abate, not levy, the property tax for these bonds. The village board approved first reading of the ordinance at its November 28th meeting. Questions on the board? Hearing no questions. This is roll call. Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Marquis,
Aye.
Trustee Rappin,
Aye.
Trustee Ryder,
Aye.
Trustee Ankerman,
Aye.
Trustee Fisher,
Aye.
and Trustee Hatch.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Next item would be item 20, and that would be a resolution approving additional seating in the bicycle shop restaurants on 28 to 30 East Center Avenue, known as Bonk and Half Pizza. Is there a motion to approve the ordinance? A resolution. Is there a motion to approve a resolution?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. In 2020, the village board approved ordinance 2020-13 as amended, which consolidated the zoning relief applicable to the Center Avenue Partners development, including special use permits for the restaurants located within the development. Innovasi, Via over Door, Bonk, Half Pizza, and Prairie Espresso. Ordinance 2020-13 was adopted concurrent with a relocation of Bonk to its current tenant space. At that time, Bonk's operator expressed interest in adding seating for patrons on site. However, the Illinois Plumbing Code requires, generally, that a restaurant have public bathrooms immediately available in order to offer on-premise eating. For reference, the Illinois Plumbing Code is adopted and administered by the state of Illinois. The village does not have the authority to grant variations to the code, nor can it amend it. It can only impose restrictions that are more restrictive than the Illinois Plumbing Code, and only then with the express consent of the Illinois Department of Public Health. Prior to the adoption of Ordinance 2020-13, the PCZBA considered the zoning impacts, including parking impacts, of allowing patron sitting at Bonk and approved the necessary zoning relief to allow this activity. However, as the operator did not identify a way to do this lawfully under the Illinois Plumbing Code, the ordinance allows the operator to return to the village board in the future once a solution was identified. Specifically, modification to the, I will skip that part, too small. The operator of Bonk has identified a provision of the Illinois Plumbing Code that would allow a limited number of seats, no more than 10, as shown in the attached revised floor plan, as long as Bonk allows patrons to use a bathroom located on the second floor of their building. The attached draft resolution would simply approve the operator's proposal. And I'm sorry, I could not read that. I'm sorry, too small for me.
Can I just ask a basic question? The solution isn't that they put in a new bathroom, it's that they come to the understanding that allowing them to use a second floor bathroom would satisfy their desire to have 10 seats available. So is that?
So they want to have more seats than what they can get with what the current plumbing code allows.
Okay,
So they've been trying to explore, could they share restrooms with some of their neighbors
Okay.
Like have like a shared hallway, which you see in some,
Yeah.
it's pretty common. They haven't been able to reach agreement with some of their neighbors yet on how to find a way to do that. But
Okay.
there is a provision right now which allows them to have no more than 10, and chances are they'll have fewer because there's gotta be at least one employee there, so that's 9, right? So you can only, between employees and patrons,
yep.
they can only have so many seats.
Yep,
And sharing restrooms that may be, up the hall and around the corner.
yeah.
So, so that's their situation. They may come back at some other point where they've figured it out and
Yeah.
found a way to make it work. But right now, they're just not there yet, and this is kind of an interim step that they want to go ahead and
Okay.
try to get approval for.
Okay.
Just to clarify, what you're saying is it's 10 seats, 10 people in the building using the restroom.
Sharing the restrooms.
So the blueprint that they've shared shows 10 seats.
So we asked for an updated
Yeah.
image to ensure that, so we would have relayed back to them that this is the clarity is you can have
9 seats.
9, maybe 8, depending on how many people are working that day.
Right.
But so chances are it's going to be a 4-top, or, you know what I mean? They're going to be able to move things around and,
Thank you. This is a fine clarification, actually.
Yep.
Any more comments? on the
Yeah,
board?
I mean, I just, Drew and I spoke earlier today, because I had some questions about the parking, because I think initially when half and half moved in, they had said they were just gonna be takeout or delivery, there wasn't gonna be any seating, so we kind of talked through that a little bit, but, and that was fine, I feel comfortable with what we have in front of us, but I did wanna thank staff, I feel like these cover memos are always so well done and so helpful. So especially in this one, the understanding of the Illinois Plumbing Code and how that affects us as a community. So I just wanted to say thank you for going through the time and effort to put these together. I appreciate it.
it's a great read, that plumbing code, for
It's
the
very,
record.
I'm sure it's very exciting.
Well, thank you.
I'm glad I got the cliff
We
notes.
put a lot of work, probably more than most departments like dealing with, but they do a very fine job, so, thank you for that.
Other questions on the board?
And just one of the things that Trustee Markey and I talked about is that, I think you tell me, brought you comfort, is that generally speaking, pizza businesses are like 75% takeout, regardless of how many seats they have. And that likely, the way this is used, just from our observations, it's, the kids coming in the afternoons for a slice. I mean, that's kind of what we expect will be used.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Excuse me.
Hearing no other comments on the board. This is a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? This motion carries. Thank you very much. Next item is item number 21, a resolution approving an intergovernmental agreement and memorandum of understanding by and among the Village of Lake Bluff Park District, and North Shore Water Reclamation District regarding 503 Sunrise Avenue. Is there a motion to approve this resolution?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. And I understand a lot of work has gone into this, the making of this resolution. To reduce the likelihood of sewage overflows into Lake Michigan and to allow for ordinary maintenance and repair of its facilities and infrastructure, the North Shore Water Reclamation District, NSWRD, created plans to construct an approximately 1 million gallon detention basin on the leased property owned by the village and make other related infrastructure and aesthetic improvements. On September 26, 2022, the village approved ordinance number 2022-26, granting Rio Development Plan and site plan approval for the project. This approval was conditioned on the NSWRD entering into an intergovernmental, I cannot say that word, I'm sorry, agreement and memorandum of understanding, MOU, with the village and Lake Bluff Park District regarding the construction and maintenance of a project. Over the past few months, the NSWRD, Park District, and Village have met to develop the attached MOU, which is intended to set forth the responsibilities of all parties as we collectively plan and advance the project. Noteworthy responsibilities for the village include granting the park district a license for the use of village property, formally authorizing the long-standing essential practice. The MOU sets forth several obligations for the NSWRD, including but not limiting to completing the project in accordance with the approved plans by May 24, 2024. Number 2, protecting village infrastructure and Lake Michigan from possible negative impacts of constructions. And number 3, providing safe access to the North Beach during construction. In addition to managing the parking at the lakefront, the MOU requires the Park District to maintain the new restrooms and outdoor showers to be constructed as part of the project. Both the village and the Park District will consider the MOU on Monday evening, while the NSWRD will consider approval of the MOU on December 14th, 2022. Questions on the board?
Do we have any thoughts on whether there may be, ramifications from the other parties involved saying, we want to change this or move that or adjust some wording, or do we feel like everybody's come to consensus here?
I think there shouldn't be any more changes. There's a handful of little typos, Susan has sent and you sent from Barbara as well, but I think this is done.
Okay.
So.
Peter, have you reviewed this in detail? Let me see, look.
Yes.
My partner.
More than-
Ben Schuster as well.
Okay. And just a general question for you, Drew. Most of this work's going to be done in 2023. What kind of inconvenience will our residents feel during the season in 2023?
Well, it'll be, I think generally speaking, for those residents that remember what happened along the lakefront for the Beans household with the trucks coming in and coming out.
Yeah.
It's probably the best similar experience to draw upon. Similarly, our hope is that they can do a lot of the hauling in the coldest months when the ground's frozen, so they have the least impact to our infrastructure. But from a beach user, is losing the South Beach during construction. Yeah. The park district is working with Lake Forest and other park districts trying to maintain the services and programs that they offer to district members. And then the yacht club has been displaced for that period of time. And I know they're trying to find some other places to put in the water, but that's kind of high level what you can expect. But if beach users want to come in and have access and go down to the North Beach, that should remain open. There will be, I'm sure, intermittent closures when there's delivery of materials that may stop them for a few minutes of passing the roadway.
And it might be a fine point, by the way, too, because if we have trucks removing material from the beach, driving up the access road to the beach, and we have kids, moms, strollers, trying to come down that road to go to the beach, we might have an issue. Should we consider having an oversight from the village on that road? I know this is asking for staff to be there, but it's not going to be a convenient situation.
No, it won't be. But there, I think the goal is, I think the method and means generally aren't dictated that the contractor will bring forth. This is how we plan to handle this. The NSWD will meet with them and say, okay, this makes sense, but they know they're responsible for maintaining access in a safe way. So they'll most certainly reach out to us and help. Are we comfortable with these things?
Got it.
And I imagine there'll probably be almost single point access using the stairs to the greatest extent they can, and then maybe having periods of time when you can't use the hill.
I think there'll be more noise and more dust than there was at the previous lakefront project, but most of that can get mitigated. There was trucks backing down Lillian Dell, but that really only impacted 3 to 5 residents. In this case, you'll hear it when you're at the beach. There will be stuff blowing around when it's windy. That's just a fact of what they're trying to build.
And are they going to work on weekends? Do we know?
The permit usually allows them to work on Saturdays. I think it was a regular 7 to 6, Saturdays 8 to 5, Sundays and holidays only with special permission from the village.
So So large trucks may be going up and down that ramp on a summer Saturday.
We haven't issued a building permit, but our standard conditions would allow it.
Yeah, and again, they too want to minimize impact since they're responsible, so they're going to try to do it when in the cold era season if they can. And I think what we found out with like the Beans project is that things happen in spurts, right? There'd be a lot of loads coming in, dropping materials off, then there'd be a lull, and then there would be another pickup, and you know, the first thing they're gonna do is gonna excavate, and then they'll, you know, do forming, then they'll pour, so the concrete truck, you know, so it's, then they'll.
There's periods of forming and then a week of pouring and then the forming and then pouring. That is a good point though, because sometimes when we do residential permits, we make notes about you can't park across some driveway, you can't, you know, bother the neighbors. If they were trying to run 400 trucks a day on a Saturday, I think we should think about how to write that condition to try to prevent that.
Could we ask them to,
Giving it-
I'm sorry, were you done?
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Could we ask them to give us like a weekly schedule or a monthly schedule, something that we can, let's say there are gonna be trucks there all day long hauling stuff. Can they let us know maybe in advance? So that's something we could share either like on our Facebook or Instagram or in our e-newsletter, just to let residents know.
Yeah, I think
In
we can ask for
advance?
that. So
I don't know how
Wednesday,
feasible that is.
well, I think it'll be, you know, like any, for example, the crossing. We expect them to start any day now, 18 months later. But the idea that we'll have a general understanding, here's the schedule, and if there's probably noteworthy activities, like we know they're gonna be trucking in this week, we can push that out through the e-newsletter, say, hey, heads up, this is happening. So
I wouldn't guarantee weekly, but during periods of, you know, intense activity, we should be able to get the contractor's schedule at least roughly.
Okay.
I would like to relay also the fact that I've had a lot of very complimentary comments about our newsletter. And that newsletter is very much read and looked at for reference by people in this community. So it might be a fine place to put more details for what's happening in the village for traffic and schedule. Thank you. If there are no more
I've
comments.
got one more question. I'm
Steve?
sorry. And I realize this does not relate really to this agreement, so, sorry, but and we can talk about this another day, but certainly we want to do a marketing effort to our community to let them know about this inconvenience and the great benefit that they'll get afterwards. And I'm sure you guys have a typical method for doing that and creating that awareness.
we will, and there'll be opportunities that should be very good timing when, assuming that the NSWRD awards the contract on Wednesday, because that's what they've talked about, is approving the MOU, awarding the contract. Then they'll have pre-construction meetings. I mean, they want to get started. The contractor who they believe they will be awarding this project to has already told them that even though they're starting, you know, a little later than they wanted to, they still think they can meet all these deadlines. There's enough time for them to work within that they seem pretty comfortable, so.
So I noticed that the deadline is 5/24/2024. What happens if that contractor exceeds that schedule? What will happen?
Well, if that should happen, hopefully there's conversations leading up to that, right? So the idea, there is a provision there that says within the agreement that if there is extraordinary circumstances, like we have the worst winter on record and the wettest summer of all, you know, it's like there's extenuating circumstances that this could drag out, and that we talked about. Look, if they were nervous about that, right, and as they should be, and so we said, look, if that's happening, let's talk, and we can try to, you know, plan a softer landing, or at least try to make this as least painful as possible. But that could happen. That always can happen. You know, weather's really going to dictate a lot of things with this project.
Okay. Thank you. It is a roll call. The clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Rappin?
Aye.
Trustee Ryder?
Aye.
Trustee Ankerman?
Aye.
Trustee Fisher?
Aye.
Trustee Hatch?
Aye.
Thank you.
And Trustee Markey?
Aye.
Unforgettable. Oh, wow.
Thank you, Joy.
He's doing two rolls tonight.
He's like, there's someone over there.
Next item is item number 22. That would be a resolution approving a sign code exemption for live storage at 105 Albrecht Drive. Is there a motion to approve this resolution?
Motion to approve.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you very much. The village board approved the site plan and sign code exemption for 105 Albrecht Drive on May 23rd, 2022 for a project to remodel the existing building into a self-storage building and build an addition on the east side. A generic signage for a self-storage building without a brand name was included. Today, the project is being acquired by Life Storage and they have applied for approval for sign specific to their company. The new sign proposal included the following changes. 1, a retaining wall was added to provide a level area for the monument sign by the driveway at the northwest corner on the lot. Number 2, the sign on Route 41 will have channel letters that project out 5 feet from the sign. The previous version was flat, 5 inches, I'm sorry. 3, a second wall sign was added at the northwest corner of the building so that both the west and north faces had signs proposed here. The addition of a second wall sign requires a sign code exemption since only corner lots are allowed to have 2 wall signs. Other lot types, including through lots like this one, are allowed 1 wall sign. Both the original sign request and the new version also include a sign code exemption for the wall signs to exceed the allowable 20 feet height by 2 feet and 9 inches, which allows the sign to be centered vertically between the top of the windows and the top of the parapet wall. The plans were presented to the Architectural Board of Review on December 6. The ABR, by a vote of 4-0, recommended that the sign code exemption to allow the second wall sign be denied, so as not to allow the sign reading climate controlled, and that the rest of the request be approved with the condition that if a retaining wall is needed near the monument sign, the retaining wall should be behind the sign, not in front. The ABR recommends that the sign code exemption allowing wall sign A to exceed the 20 feet height it be granted, as it was for the previous sign application. The ABR has the authority to approve signs which conform to the sign code, but only to make a recommendation to the village board for signs which require an exemption. Any comments on the board? Hearing no comments. This is a voice vote, or is it a roll call?
It is a voice vote.
It's a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All in, any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you very much. Next item number 23 is a resolution authorizing the execution of a construction contract with her construction for the village of Lake Bluff sanitary sewer lining project.
Yes, that you,
Is this correct?
it is now, yeah.
Is there a motion to approve this resolution?
So moved.
A second.
Second.
Thank you. Earlier in 2022, the village had 8,300 lineal feet of its sanitary sewers televised to identify any defect. The television report recommended several segments of sewers to be lined. Using the recommendations from the television report and reports of sewer backups during rainfalls over the summer, the village engineer identified 2,580 feet of sewer for lining. The Illinois Municipal Partnering Initiative, MPI, regularly secure bids for sanitary sewer lining work, most recently in May of 2022 for the village of Mount Deline and the cities of Lake Forest and Highland Park. The low bidder was her construction of Goodfield, Illinois. Upon review of the MPI bid, the village approached her construction about contracting for sewer lining work at the same unit prices from the MPI bid, and her construction agreed. The village believes this will result for completion of a project at a lower cost than by the village bidding out the project by itself. Section 4 of the village purchasing policy provides the village the ability to enter into construction contracts using cooperative purchasing agreements such as MPI. The fiscal year 2022 budget, including $465,000 for sanitary sewer improvements. Of this amount, $183,000 has not yet been expended due to delays in other sanitary sewer projects. While this project will require a future budget amendment as it was not budgeted in the current fiscal year, the village engineer recommends that the village board piggyback the MPI award and authorize a construction contract with her construction in the amount of $147,680.30. Questions on the board? And that would be a roll call. Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Ryder?
Aye.
Trustee Ankerman?
Aye.
Trustee Fisher?
Aye.
Trustee Hatch?
Aye.
Trustee Markey?
Aye.
And Trustee Rappin?
Aye.
Thank you very much. And next would be item number 24, the trustees' report. Do any trustees wish to make a report tonight? How do you say that company's name, by the way?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. So do the trustees need to make a report tonight? Thank you. Next would be item number 25, the consideration of the November 28, 2022 executive session meeting minutes. Is there a motion to approve these minutes?
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Any changes?
No.
Thank you. Clerk, please call the roll.
Voice vote.
Voice vote? Voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Sure.
Now, yeah, since you appointed them, it was effective January 1.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
One precision I would like to make.
Are we finished with that vote?
To my knowledge, there was a voice vote. All in favor? None, yeah, motion was passed, yep.
There needs to be a precision concerning item 10A, I believe, or 10B.
Clarification.
The appointment of 10B, the appointment of Mr. Jeff McGuire. After a conversation, it would be effective today, but he has requested to only be available on January 1st. If he were to be available before January 1st, he is appointed as of today and can join that meeting as he wishes. And I want to make sure that this is part of our record today. Okay?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Good. Next would be executive session.
Brief, yes.
Brief, as I'm being told. May I have a motion to go into closed session for the purpose of discussing property acquisition pursuant to the Illinois Open Meeting Act, and that upon the adjournment of a closed session, this regular meeting will be deemed to automatically be adjourned by the same vote without the conduct of any further business.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
This is a roll call.
I'm sorry, the motion was made by,
Me.
and seconded by, gotcha, thank you so much. Roll call vote. Trustee Ankerman?
Aye.
Trustee Fisher?
Aye.
Trustee Hatch?
Aye.
Trustee Markey?
Aye.
Trustee Rappin?
Aye.
And Trustee Ryder.
Aye.
Thank you. So, and
We just
this-
need a few minutes just to switch some things out real quick.
All right, and this concludes the open part of the village board meeting. Thank you to everyone, to anyone in attendance, and have a great evening.